We're going to get started. I'm starting with the everybody. So we are super excited. Professor, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of her bio. Lori is a professor of craft and civil and environmental engineering, with teaching responsibilities in the areas of, can you all hear me? Structural engineering and sustainable design. She is a fellow of the American Society of Civil Engineers and the Structural Engineering Institute. She's been awarded the Chancellor's Cup and Madison Surratt Prize for Excellence in Undergraduate Teaching, Insight into Diversity, Inspiring Women, the STEM Awards, the Margaret Cunningham Women's Center Mentoring Award, and the Award for Excellence in Teaching from the Vanderbilt School of Engineering. She's a member of the American Society of Engineering Educators and enjoys implementing innovative teaching strategies and developing senior design projects that involve sustainable design. She's led numerous study abroad courses. You were in Paris when you communicated. I was like, oh, including on sustainable building and infrastructure in Northern Ireland. She will share from her experience of teaching sustainability to Vanderbilt students and her individual experience of incorporating sustainable practice. And without further ado, we welcome Lori Troxel.
Set a timer so I don't ramp.
So I'm more than happy to do this, or you're welcome to.
Okay. Sure.
Okay, well, hello, good to see all of you here today. Are you ready for some calculus? Okay, so this is not math, I mean, this is hopefully inspiration, a lot of stories. Okay, so I want to chat a little bit about my background because I hopefully if I encourage you and helpful to you in your life. So I grew up in Montana. I got to go to beautiful Glacier National Park often, once or twice a year, you know, hiking. I grew up on a farm a few hours away from that, and my life was a mix of, you know, hiking and being outdoors and doing farming and more industrial kind of stuff, you know, tractors and stuff. So this is me a few years ago, and I went back finding the antler on the ground, and so I took that home. This is the bottom. I thought that if I could kill a rattlesnake, that I wouldn't think there's snakes anymore. So that's us looking for rattlesnakes. Which I'm glad we never found one. I still haven't found rats. And I love animals. I love being outside. We have chickens, cows, lots of dogs. I love fishing and fishing. Every time it rained, we couldn't do farming. And the world's largest tractor, Big Bud, was in my home. I love Montana. I love the farm. I really just wanted to be a farm wife, and that was my goal in life. And my mom said, no, you're going to go to college and you're going to leave Montana for at least a few years and you can come back later if you want. Well, guess what happened? I never moved back to Montana. I still love it though. I went to college, got my undergraduate degree in civil engineering, and then I moved to California and Arizona, and still loved hiking and being outside. And throughout my life, I just didn't see any conflict between doing kind of industrial type of things and loving being outside and loving being in the environment. And I worked at a nuclear power plant in Phoenix. I designed foundations for electrical substations in California. So it wasn't glamorous. I designed these little connections here in the nuclear power plant. All right, so let's see. Then I moved to Tennessee and continued to enjoy being outdoors. This is at Radnor Lake, which I love to go to. I saw this in here and everything, catch this fish, and I was like, oh, he's gonna chop it up and eat it. Nope. Well, so I love all the outdoors here. When I moved to Tennessee, I designed bridges for the state of Tennessee. And I didn't design that one. The next. That's what I was. And I was told,
Sorry about that.
I was told that, maybe 20 years before I had to design things like Natural Springs Parkway. I was like, okay, this is fun for a couple of years, but I need to go back to school and get some more education. So off to Vanderbilt for my master's and PhD in structural engineering. Around that time, there were two influential books in my life. First one, The Inconvenient Truth, was very inconvenient for me. I was growing up on a farm and being from a fairly conservative background, I hadn't really thought about, environmentalism or any difference between loving being outside the environment and climate change or global warming. And when this came out and it started to divide us and made climate change or global warming a political thing, I didn't want any part of it because I was in a community that I knew was not going to think climate change, global warming was happening or even climate change. So I just ignored it anytime the topic came up. And because I knew it would impact my life in many ways. It would affect my and affect friendships. So I just ignored it. And then I was walking in the neighborhood and my neighbor said, have you read this book Collapse? I was like, no. And he's like, what's it about? He said, well, there's stories about Montana in there. And I was like, Montana, cool. So I read the book. I don't know if any of you have read it, but how society students can fail to succeed. And so it was all about how mining companies had destroyed so much of the clean water in Montana. I was like, oh no, this is real. And it's all about choices that societies had made about the environment and how it impacted them and how it could cause them to thrive or it could cause them to collapse. So yeah, I did have to start thinking about this more. And so fortunately, I had this opportunity with Vanderbilt was to teach a study abroad. They said, this is 4 weeks and 4 weeks of study abroad. You can choose a location and you can choose a topic. So I've been to Northern Ireland a few times and they speak English, so that's a good place to go. And it's like, I don't want to figure this out about sustainability. So let's study sustainability. And I'll just learn with the students. It wasn't like I was like, okay, students, I'm a leader, I'm going to convince you of this. I was just kind of like, this is an opportunity for me to learn. So we got to do some great service projects, remove invasive species, remove stinging nettles from a community garden. We need to remove stinging nettles. That was fun. We went to some wind farms, tidal energy research lab, and some other people set up speakers, and they set up some speakers in the Green Party. So I heard, we all learned together a lot about how Europe and other countries were dealing with the politics of climate change, less about political differences, but more about how they are working together to address climate change. So I did this for about 3 years, and at the end of it, I realized, yeah, okay, I gotta be a part of the solution here. I'm in a place where I can influence people. I can teach people about sustainability. Oh yeah, this is just, these are actually people I met in Northern Ireland, and I don't know what about the Scots Irish that they can grow here, like. So also around this time, Vanderbilt sent out an email and offered for anyone on campus to develop a program that would help students learn. It should kind of be open to anyone in the university. It was for a part of accreditation. They're required to do this, and so a bunch of people sent in proposals. I sent in one to design thinking to help solve problems in Nashville. And they selected that idea and they helped me form this committee with fantastic people on it. And together we developed this program called TWIG, which is Design as an Immersive Gender Development Experience. And design, I don't know, you know, for design thinking, it was developed at Stanford Business School, but it's a way of designing things with the end user in mind. And it really addresses, it kind of has 5 steps. But one of the steps is to really get to know the people that are using the product, solution, whatever you're offering, and to understand them and their emotions, because people aren't going to use the product or accept the solution unless it addresses their emotional side as well. So it was really interesting to get to develop this with the team, and then it was incorporated in classes all around Vanderbilt, from human and organizational development, English, to fashion design, and then I incorporated in civil engineering class. So, along with the study abroad class, there was also a class that was taught at Vanderbilt that I taught that went along with the study abroad portion. And so I started incorporating design thinking into that class. And one of the first projects we did was redesigning Fleming Yard. This was an area that had a little plaque on a wall, but was all overgrown, and so nobody knew they existed, and nobody went in that space. So my students used design thinking. They talked to lots of students to find out what they wanted, and they redesigned that space. So now it's one of the most used places on campus. It's right outside the dining hall. People eat there, study there, and so design thinking was very effective in developing a space that students love and use also. It gets them outside, so they can be outside as well. Then I also worked with Vanderbilt Dining to improve the sustainability of dining, reducing food waste, but also looking at food production and carbon emissions from food. So we're looking at how can we reduce the carbon emissions in the food that Vanderbilt Dining serves. And you probably have all heard about beef, so the carbon emissions are high from beef, so we're looking at can we reduce the consumption of beef at Vanderbilt Dining. And so these students came up with this idea to offer some kind of prize if they went meatless for that meal. And Vanderbilt Dining was so excited about it, they implemented it even before the class was over. And it happened to be Earth Day, so they got these little flags. Can't see them there, and they put up this little sign: choose to go meatless. And then if the meal they chose did not have meat in it, dining would put this little flag in it, and then they get Starbucks coffee and turkey at checkout. So I'm trying to reward them for that. Okay, and so this year I started the class. I was gonna look at food again. And then I read the surveys from the first day of what students wanted out of the class, and none of them were really interested in food. That's not exciting. Okay, second day, let's redesign this class together. I'd always wanted to do this. I heard about letting students help design the course. So I was like, let's give this a try. So we had these tables, kind of like this, they're whiteboard tables, and I had them just write down the topics they're interested in sustainable design. And then there were about 6 of them that we coalesced around. And then we were gonna talk about that one week. They're gonna do research and we talk about it, and then the next week go on a site visit. So then we came up with sites that we wanted to visit related to that topic. And then I was like, okay, I need a grade too. So how are we gonna assess this? And they didn't want any quizzes, they didn't want any tests. It's fine with that. We'll do project, we'll do writing. And one of the things that we did was, well, we were using design thinking for thinking up solutions, but I found that with design thinking, sometimes you're missing this first step of the complexity of the problem that students come up with simple solutions. So I started incorporating something called map the system before you do design thinking. And that's where you try and draw a map of the system that your problem is in, so you can see all the things that are influencing that. And one of the first steps is to draw an iceberg model. So after they would do research, they come to class and then they each draw an iceberg model of whatever their problem or topic they were thinking about. And so you start with the problem at the top and then go through like policies and mindsets, and then at the bottom of the triangle is called the root cause of the problem. And that's where you want to try and design a solution to address, you know, why won't people eat less meat? You try to address that instead of like, you know, some other reason up there. And then from that, you can draw a map. These maps can get really big and all interconnected, but I tried to start them simple so that they could see a loop of how you know, one small part of the system was interconnected. So this one was about coffee, and then this one student loved pork, so they were looking at the environmental damage from pork from pig farms. This one is about avocados, which we all found really interesting, that there are actually gangs that are part of the avocado industry. Let's see, so that was a project-based course, and it's actually open to anyone in the university, which is really fun to mix disciplines and see how different disciplines approach the problem. But a few years ago, our department decided to start a required course in sustainable design and civil engineering. And I was lucky enough to get to develop that course. So we started off the first year, about 7 or 8 years ago, and because of my history at that, I got to convince them that all the environmental problems are out there, so that how to make these PowerPoints with pictures, and you know, it's just like smog and air pollution and fish dying and all this thing. And then I realized actually these students are already scared of all these things. Like, I need to quit trying to convince them these things are real. They, for the most part, believe them are real. Let's move on to how do we address, you know, what are the root causes? Let's look at solutions instead of trying to convince them. So one thing I've done, I also, you know, wanted to make the solutions related to really civil engineering, and my background is structural engineering, so I wanted to apply it to structural engineering. And one of the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide is the making of cement to be used in concrete. So that's what we've been looking at in the past few years. We go to the Gulch, and this is to the Son Arena Gulch, and we went to the top level for the new building. But look down at the Gulch, so they got an idea of how much had been built there recently. And then I had them make an estimate of how much concrete was used in building all the new buildings in the Gulch. And then they calculate how much carbon is emitted from all those buildings. And then look at what is so there's an estimate, different estimates you can find of how much damage each ton of carbon does. So they come up with a dollar value related to the carbon emissions from the Gulch. And then so then, you know, we talked about how can we make a difference in the way people build. And so two of the big ways government can have an impact is carbon taxes and cap and trade. So we look at different pricing of carbon taxes, and then they see how much additional cost that would add on to these buildings by having the carbon tax on that carbon from the building. And then the last thing is, okay, if that raised your rent by that much, would you be willing to pay that to account for the carbon dioxide? And probably 75% say no, they would not. But some of them do say they would want. And then I guess along with that, so then we look at the price of carbon emissions. Then I have them do a design thinking project to reduce the amount of carbon emitted, reduce the embodied carbon in buildings, and that's the amount of carbon that goes into the building of the building, not the operational carbon, which is carbon emitted from using the building over time. So if we can reduce the amount of embodied energy, we reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere from that point forward. So it has a huge impact if we can reduce the amount of carbon emitted now versus operational carbon. And then I have when we come in and teach them how to create a business model canvas. for their solution, so they can find out, okay, is this a viable idea? Could it be implemented as a business and be profitable by reducing or selling the product or building in a different way? So another thing I've gotten to do is to work with Sterling Ranch. This is a development out in Colorado, and it was actually owned and developed by the parents of one of the students who was on my very first study project. So they came back having developed, and they wanted to offer this experiential learning opportunities for the students in civil engineering. So every May, I take about 15 to 20 students out to Sterling Ranch, and they get to see how a community is built from the ground up. So it was the largest piece of undeveloped land outside of Denver. And so they're seeing how the sustainability efforts are, one is solar panels. Solar panels are out, so you automatically get solar on your rooftop unless you decide you don't want it. You have to decide that you don't want it. Versus opt-in, which is you have to say, yes, I want solar. And so they've really had a high uptake of solar panels because of choosing that. Then we talk a lot about water. So this is looking at a wastewater treatment plant. So out west, there's a lot of issues with water quantity. And so they really get to see that because Sterling Ranch has to guarantee water rights for every house before they build it. So you get to see firsthand, we go to the mountains and see the reservoir that supplies the water. And then Colorado just implemented in direct potable reuse, DPR. So you can take the water from your home and directly recycle it and reuse it. So that you can go to the water treatment plant, they recycle it and send it right back to Sterling. But it sounds great, but it's very expensive because salts accumulate in that water over time. So eventually have to do some type of membrane filtration or reverse osmosis to remove those salts. So no matter what solution you come up with, it's very expensive. All right, so along with that, 1 year we got to go to Israel to see how they were dealing with water and see how their reverse osmosis plants. They actually get all their water from the Mediterranean, which Denver doesn't have a sea next to it. So, but that's the same process that you would use if you're going to use direct potable reuse.
So it's a picture of water.
Oh, that's the Dead Sea. Yeah, we're not sitting on anything, we're floating. And that's reverse osmosis plant, and then that's in one of the canyons. And yeah, the top two are, that one's at Sterling Ranch, or just outside of Sterling Ranch. I'm the advisor for a student group, American Society of Civil Engineers. We do cleanup at Love Circle 6 times a year. And then we also go to competitions, and recently we won the Sustainable Solutions competition. And so those students are going to go to the national competition. Then I'm also it's kind of a joke, but in charge of senior design. And I like to kind of get everybody stirred up when we're all together in the same room. But the point is that if we civil engineers, we sometimes get overlooked in senior design because we're not making a widget or something like that. We can't build a water treatment plant and show it to everybody. But I try to let them know that civil engineers, if we can build better, then the world will be a safer place. We won't need if we have fewer pedestrian accidents or car pollution, or buildings are cleaner and safer, then we may not need as much biomedical engineering. So I talk about clean water, how it saves lives, and then replacing the infrastructure. If we can design that well, we won't have as much traffic and smog and pollution, and our water will be cleaner. And then we also can make the world a more beautiful place, so people want to be outdoors and are healthier. So just a couple, I'll quickly go through. One project students did was this empathic transportation design. It was part of a research project at Vanderbilt where people wore smartwatch or Fitbits, and then they measured their baseline heart rate and temperature, and then they measured when their stress levels went up next to roadways. And so the height of these, I think it's the height of those shows, or maybe, I don't know, the height of, I can't remember which, shows where people were most stressed. And so that's where there's most likely to be an accident, like a car pedestrian collision. So instead of waiting for somebody to get hurt, being proactive, trying to figure out how can we prevent collisions, these accidents from even
What
happening.
is this solution for that? I mean, yes, you know. Then the solution is,
So it might be slowing down the cars, it might be making the pedestrian area bigger, and more visible, it might be bulb outs. Where it kind of narrows the distance that the crosswalk is. Instead of starting way back over at the shoulder, that where the pedestrian has to go across the shoulder, the bike lane, the 2 vehicle lanes, then know that you bulb out until the traffic lane. Then so that it's a shorter distance across. Then some students worked on creating healthier living spaces for the village at Glencliff. This is you guys know about it? Yeah, so I love this project. So they worked on creating a living building where they did water reuse in the buildings there. And then this year, he is one of the people that proposed this great project. So it was to design a living building for Farmers Corner in Bell's Bend. It's a place where they wanted the local farmers to be able to sell their produce, and then they wanted the building to be a healthy and sustainable building. So they used the Living Building Challenge. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it has these different pedals that you can achieve by reusing, well, getting all of your water and treating all of your water on site, getting all of your energy on site from maybe solar, geothermal, wind, and then using only non-toxic materials, and then and making it safe for pedestrians or making transportation safer. Those are some of the things that are involved. And so students, this is our group of students talking to some farmers. They did a presentation at Bell's Bend that he organized it, but it was fantastic. I don't know, maybe 100 people there and to hear the presentation. And because of that design, have they met with the mayor? They might.
Not prepared yet, met with codes officials, zoning, Metro Water, and also some other fire marshal. And so they, usually when I talk to them about living buildings, there's just these blank stares, and they just tell me what all reasons you keep to it. And but instead they were very excited, and so earlier we had this one-on-one coming up with the mayor, and it's going to review it. And so anyway, the project is moving ahead. It's an actual build.
So that was really fun. So, and then another group built a steel bridge in Costa Rica. I don't know how they were able to do this, but they designed that the bridge at Vanderbilt and fabricated it in pieces that were short enough that they could each have free carry-ons on Southwest, and they carried the bridge down there and they put it all together, all within this school year. It was incredible. So this is just a sampling of students, what they're doing now. A lot of them are involved in sustainability. Several of them have become attorneys, environmental and studying environmental law. And yeah, doing a lot of good things in the world. And I thought I'd just circle back to me. I have found a community that now that I love to be in, and they're all working towards creating a better environment, a more sustainable environment. And I guess the reason I wanted to bring up that story mostly is just that people change, not mostly because of facts, but you have to take them to be supported and have to know that they're going to be in a community. It's really hard to leave a community. And for me, it took a long time. And now I'm very grateful that I do have a community that I can talk openly about these things. And so I guess my final words would just be kind and loving and patient with your friends and family and neighbors that maybe don't think the same way that you do, and I think that's our big hope for making this world a better place.
Thank you.
So I have a question. You were raised in Montana, and then later on you realized, oh, there's poison in the water in Montana.
Yeah.
Now, with all the new living, are the current residents in Montana getting it? And has that been cleaned up?
Has that been cleaned up? There are Superfund sites. That are being cleaned up by the government, but I honestly don't know if all of that is cleaned up, but you know. What happens is a mining company's mine and then they declare bankruptcy and then I say we don't have. Money to fix the problem.
Because I think of Montana is pristine.
I know, that's
the
the way I
in there, and it's like, what?
yeah. Yeah, but back. Forests and mountains.
I was gonna ask a question, like how do you sort of measure the outcome of the projects that you all do? To see the true impact of those projects?
Yeah, well, it's hard to do with students because we've never did their short time and then, yeah. So, but most of the projects I do have, after they come with their idea, I do have them try and measure what is the impact of this when this activity difference. Either in carbon emissions or, I mean, it's not the main one, but yeah, I do try and have them. Make an estimate of that. I mean, a lot of the projects in the class don't get implemented. Senior design projects, some of them get implemented and some don't. Some of our more used to exercise design. But at least that gets them thinking about how to do this. And I like what you're asking because it is really important to make them think about the actual impact because it's easy to come up with ideas and solutions. But they may not have the impact that you want.
Just one other question on that, so they come into the program as seniors? Or are they in the design?
They're
Classes as a senior or?
there's several different classes. So there's a required sustainable design and civil engineering is a sophomore level class. And then senior design is their capstone project or their last year. So hopefully we're trying to incorporate for all through the 4 years into senior design. They're not all of them are related to design steel building, but they are required in a report to look at health, safety, and welfare impact, and then the global, cultural, social impact of the project, and environmental impact.
The question related to talking about the phones and being receptive to these changes. I know Metro has requirements for their own buildings, but I wonder. Are you aware of codes like really evolving your policies for other builders and other designers in terms of what's required? I think there's a requirement around waste and then recycling on site, but I was just wondering if you could address that if they
I actually know a lot about.
Metro.
yeah, it's a commercial building. Outside of metro buildings are like.
So, I was on the Metro, construction demolition waste steering committee. And so we actually worked to, develop legislation that would require, contractors submitting basically a demolition plan. And how do we deal with waste and not go to the landfill? And then that was, a lot of initiative was done with that, but then the actual law never went forward, because of the. And so Metro is very, friendly to the developers, very friendly to. Contractors. And they thought it would be permanent, so, there has been some efforts done. Many cities, it's not allowed to just demolish buildings in landfill. That the materials have to be recycled and then it creates a sort of community for all types of jobs and adaptability. So I think the efforts are being done. Making progress, it's so, design buildings. Yeah, so there's a whole issue of that in design buildings, so they can be constructed, can be reused later, so design buildings are flexible. It's about that. Actually, I've been talking to Lori about next senior project to. I worked with students in London for 2 semesters, and they came up with the concept of they call it the Nashville Rail Center Center. It's a business plan to implement this, and we're being sponsored by the Kansas Lifestyle Center. They want to start up in Nashville. So that's what we're going to explore, and also the Tennessee Department of Forestry is really interested in. We have so much wood product, trees that are taken down, mulch. And so they're interested in starting to build a circular economy on local wood and trees and wood. So we're scheduling a meeting in June to kick that off as well. So if people are interested in that, I encourage everyone here to join the Living Futures. So we have a local chapter. So it's an international organization, and they're doing a pilot program for communities. And they're going to have to submit in Nashville. It was selected. It's one of the communities, but the other communities, like the country of Australia, state of California, state of Washington, we're the smallest, least politically likely community that have living buildings. So anyway, I encourage everyone to go on to living-futures.org and then sign up. We have a $0 membership. You can sign up and then select a national regional community. Because we're trying to engage more people in these discussions and new things.
I think that's what we can validate on our website.
Following up, that might be the answer to the question I asked about the living dash future. But specifically to Metro, where is the, might say, last point of the central contact, the person or the department that can most work with developers to change that idea?
Yeah, the best person would be the mayor. Because he has the most influence, but there's a great in general services that manages solid recycling for Nashville, and they're the ones working on all this. They only have so much influence that they can have. It really needs to be the community responding, and it needs to be the highest leadership in Metro to make these things happen.
So you say the mayor, but then what was the second?
The next is the general services group has, they oversee all the recycling in Nashville. They're the ones working on these initiatives, trying to get this legislation in place along with the members of the Metro Council or keys.
Just on that, are you insulated from some of the policies because you have a think tank, or are you isolated from? I'm a artist and a farmer and aspect. Sometimes when I think it's to go through farming through traditional channels of moving materials, I can do it through farm because it had less policy, less. So I'm kind of wondering if your students navigate this.
Actually, I'm not sure.
Well, are you in a meeting or so that you're insulated from some of the different policy stuff? Do you feel more freedom there, or do you feel?
Well, yes and no. So some of the things that students develop are not, they can just develop the idea, and not necessarily have, they can look at the codes and policies, et cetera, but they don't have to met somebody. If it's not actually going to develop this project, the Bell's Bend one, yeah, they want to actually, that one actually going to be built. They work with a professional engineer on the site, and so that, and Keith and the engineer are used to that process, so they were willing to help the students go through that process and see what that was like. Or in some projects, it's just going through the process, but not actually, it's not actually.
Yeah, so there's some freedom there.
Yeah, there's free. Yeah.
So for the Bell's Bend project, who funded that? And what did it cost?
Well, the engineer, record, he donated his time for that, and then. One of the students had an internship and her company donated the survey, and that's probably $10,000 to the. Engineering work, so a lot of people donated, their time, and
Materials, but not materials.
that hasn't happened yet.
It's in process, so basically, it's, the facility is there for the Bells Bend community, I don't know if people are familiar with that, there's a lot of organic farms. And so there's also a community created a nonprofit that was the Bells Bend Conservation Authority to keep this as a real asset for Nashville and the region. So basically, the building is only a 1,200 square foot building, it's a cafe. It's a place where the community can meet, but then it supports the local farms by selling their products, making bigger farmers markets there. It's basically supports, it's a visitor center, a welcome center for the Bells Bend Conservation Authority, explaining the vision and mission. But then it's also a demonstration project for those buildings, because there's only 34 buildings in the world that met the living building challenge requirements. And so it'll put Nashville on the map. So all this is being done through volunteers and donations. That's why I encourage you to go to the living. Or sign up, because then you can get in the booth at 15.1.
Where is it supposed to be?
Bells Bend. So it's well, no, it's right at the corner of Ashton Highway and Old Hickory Boulevard. And so, believe it or not, it's the last corner, the major corner in Nashville that is not developed. And so anyway, it's gonna have high visibility.
So excited about the living building in Nashville. I went to a couple of charrettes for charrette meetings for a living building we were considering every moment.
Yeah, that's our group.
Is that still happening to you? So
It is. Yep, so we're still moving forward. That's one of our initiatives, is one project, and else is another one. We've been very currently working on that. So we're trying to advocate for letting go of some Nashville. But it's difficult because, you know, the like the least likely, like it's to be letting go. Yeah.
Have you had to make any adjustments to curriculum or programs due to recent administration changes?
No, I haven't. We all are like. We all know how it's been.
A little bit of a texting question, so like we were really talking about the students looking at the buildings and technologies and department divisions. Yeah. A couple months ago, Tiffany was well atmosphere, she was kind of talking about a different type of concrete mix that they were using